I'm in a very confusing situation right now, so please bear with me if I end up being a little all over the place. I really can't help it. So, this is mostly about me, 38F, and my sister. Jennifer, my sister, is 4 years younger than me, and we have always had a good relationship. Growing up, we were pretty close. But then, life happened and we still stayed in touch, but after she started dating her boyfriend in college, and got married to him at 22, I started seeing less of her. I was obviously very happy for her, and I was even more thrilled when I found out that she was having a baby. 8 years back, she gave birth to my nephew, Anthony, and everyone just loves him to bits, me included. Personally, I never got married or had kids because it was just not my cup of tea, but for Anthony, I would do whatever it took to ensure that he had a good life. So when, 2 years back, Jennifer's husband passed away in a car crash, everyone stood by her side, and I decided that I was going to take care of the finances for her. She had quit her job after Anthony was born, so all she had were some savings that she and Anthony had put aside, whatever he had left behind, and of course, the survivor's benefits. But given the lifestyle that they had had so far, they definitely needed the extra help, and so, I decided that I was going to write her a big fat paycheck every month, just until she got a job. It has been 2 years now, and she does have a job, but I'm still writing her those checks because she told me that the only work that she could find was in sales, and since it's mostly commission, it will be difficult to maintain the lifestyle that she and her son are used to just on that. So until she finds something more sustainable, she wants me to keep helping out, and I really don't have an issue with that. After all, they are my family, and if it's for Anthony, I don't really mind. So naturally, I had been sending paychecks to her every month as usual, and part of that was also supposed to be used to clear the tuition cost. I believe that it would be disrespectful to his father's memory to change schools, so I insisted that he continued to go to public school, and since I was paying for it, I didn't see anything wrong with it. Recently though, I found out from Anthony that he had been kicked out of school and hadn't been going for the past couple of weeks because apparently, Jennifer had missed out on paying his tuition for the past couple of months. And she had been issued several warnings and reminders but hadn't paid heed to any, which is why the school authorities had to take that measure. I found out about it purely by accident when I was babysitting Anthony about a month ago. At the time, I hadn't been seeing much of him because every time I tried to visit Jennifer, she would delay it or postpone it somehow. She always seemed to be either too busy at work or seeing other friends. She always had some excuse ready, but then, one day, she herself asked me to come over and babysit Anthony because her usual babysitter hadn't shown up since she was sick and she couldn't cancel her plans for the evening. When I asked her about her plans, she didn't tell me anything. She just said that it was important because it had something to do with a client at work, and then she left as soon as I showed up at her doorstep. Her behavior had been totally bizarre recently, especially in the few months leading up to that incident. We would try and make it a point to meet each other every now and then, but since the beginning of this year, she had started behaving very strangely, and now, we would only meet for dinner at our parents' place, but never otherwise. Even when we would meet each other, she would constantly act very jittery and weird, and try to get back home as quickly as she could. So naturally, that had cut into the time that I spent with Anthony, and we were not seeing much of each other. I knew that he was not happy about it because he had already lost his father. He didn't want to lose his relationship with me as well and would often text me from his mother's phone. And last month, when I showed up at his house to babysit him, he waited for his mother to leave, and then, he started telling me everything that was going on. When he mentioned that just earlier that week, he had been kicked out of school for the non-payment of tuition costs and that his mother had given him strict instructions not to talk about it to anybody, I started to realize that something very fishy was going on. Anthony also told me a lot of other things, like his mother would hardly ever be at home, and for the past couple of months, he had probably spent more time with his babysitter than with anybody else. Things had come to a point where she even had a backup babysitter and she would alternate between the two, in case one was not available. But the one thing that she wouldn't do was cancel her plans, and more often than not, Anthony wouldn't even see her for more than a day because she would come back after his bedtime, and she would leave before he woke up the next day. I was shocked that all this was happening, and the more that Anthony talked about his mother, the more I realized that something was very off about the whole situation. The reason I hadn't found out about any of this was because every time Anthony would meet me, Jennifer would be right there with him, and his mom had told him not to speak to me about any of this. She had actually even intimidated him, and he had been scared to talk to me about any of this before. But then, he got kicked out of school, and he felt like he had to talk to me about it because he was very upset about it, since he didn't want to let go of his friends and his teachers. He told me that he didn't even get the chance to say goodbye, because one day, while he was preparing to go to school, his mother told him that there was no need to do so anymore because he had been kicked out, and he was switching to public school. First off, it was strange enough that she had decided to tell her 8-year-old son that he had been kicked out of school because she hadn't cleared his tuition payments. And that, along with the rest of the things that Anthony had told me, led me to believe that there was something wrong with Jennifer. Of course, on top of that, there was also the fact that I had been writing her pretty significant paychecks for almost 2 years now, and she was also making good money on her own. So it didn't make sense for her not to pay her son's tuition for private school for so long that he ended up getting kicked out. I was very uncomfortable and annoyed after I got to know all this from Anthony, and of course, I promised him that I was going to fix everything because I could see that he was really unhappy that day itself. I couldn't exactly do anything, and neither did I speak to Jennifer about whatever Anthony had told me when she came back home because, given the situation, I realized that it would be probably for the best if I dealt with it on my own without her knowledge. Since she had given Anthony strict instructions not to speak to me about any of this, I didn't want the poor kid to get into trouble, and that would inevitably happen if I confronted her about what I had heard. Instead, and you can judge me if you want, but I think it was necessary for me to do that, I decided to speak to a private detective and find out about all her comings and goings. Like I had said, I had found her entire behavior very fishy, and after speaking to Anthony, I was sure that she was up to no good. All that I needed was something to prove it. And within a couple of days, I found out exactly what was going on. Unfortunately, it was not the kind of thing that you want to find out about your sister, especially when your sister happens to have an 8-year-old son. By speaking to the detective, we had figured out that she was definitely not going to her workplace anymore and had presumably quit her job. Instead, she would spend all her mornings at some motel and would come out in the evening. After that, she would go home for a couple of hours, usually just 2 or 3 hours, and then she would leave again, so she could go to a club at night. The strange thing was, she wouldn't drink or anything at the club, and I can vouch for that because even when she came back home the night I had been babysitting, it was very obvious that she was still sober and was completely in her senses. It was all just really bizarre, and it took us a couple of more days to figure out who she was meeting. As it turns out, the same guy would leave the motel and the club exactly half an hour after she would leave, and it took the detective a while to pick up on that pattern. But when he did, he clicked some photos of him, got his name from the motel folks somehow, and we ran a background check. And unfortunately, as it turns out, that guy is a drug dealer. A hardcore one, at that, because from what I know, he has already been arrested twice before in the span of the past 5 years and is currently out on bail. There were some minor news clippings of him online, so it wasn't hard to find out about him. Of course, that means that he's not exactly a desirable person to be around, and it freaked me out that she had been hanging out with him so much, to the point where she was spending her entire day with him almost. I was also pretty sure that she was spending all the money on him, which is why she was running short and couldn't cover Anthony's tuition for the past few months. As soon as I found out about all of this, I decided that I was going to report her to CPS because even though she would come back home sober, there was no telling if that would still be the case in the next couple of months. And I didn't want to take that risk, especially for Anthony's sake, so I did what I had to, but things have taken a turn for the worse with my family after I reported her. Because CPS believed that it would be better for Anthony to be placed in my custody, not as an emergency measure obviously, but after around 2 weeks of me reporting her. Those 2 weeks after I reported her to CPS, I was not allowed to see Anthony at all because she obviously did not want me visiting, but then eventually, after preliminary investigations, it was decided that Anthony had better stay with me for a while. And Jennifer can have supervised visits, but as of now, she is being investigated. Even though the custody arrangement is temporary, and Jennifer still has a chance to regain custody if she just adjusts her lifestyle accordingly and of course, stops hanging out with criminals. For some reason, my parents are blaming me for all of this. A couple of weeks ago, they literally called me up and started yelling at me, calling me heartless and saying that I was a pathetic human being for what I had done. They even went to the extent of calling me selfish and told me that I was not the only person who was worried about Anthony, but I was the only person doing such extreme things, like hiring private detectives and reporting people to CPS, even when Jennifer hadn't even done anything that bad. I disagreed with them there. I told them that what Jennifer had clearly been bad enough for CPS to consider removing Anthony from her custody, and I was not going to be made to feel guilty about reporting her. Besides, she had not only neglected him emotionally, she had also been financially irresponsible, and Anthony himself had complained about everything to me, so that obviously meant that he was not happy with this situation. And then, my parents started playing the victim card on Jennifer's behalf and started to talk about how she had been suffering mentally ever since she lost her husband, and the least I could have done for her was cut her some slack because it hasn't been a long time since she lost the love of her life, and of course, she's bound to make a few bad decisions, but that doesn't make her a bad mother. They told me that I should have spoken to her before reporting her, at the very least. And I should have personally tried to get her to stop if I felt that she was doing something wrong, but instead, went straight to the authorities and tattled about her. They believed that what I had done was pathetic and were constantly making me out to be the villain, and I felt terrible about it. I blocked them later on, but a couple of days ago, they sent me an email from a new address, telling me that Jennifer was having a really difficult time coping with everything emotionally and mentally and had been having frequent breakdowns because of me. She hasn't spoken to me, nor has she shown up to see Anthony either, so I didn't know how she was doing. But after that email from my parents, I feel really guilty. If I'm being honest, the only reason I hadn't spoken to her and tried to deal with the situation by myself before reporting her to CPS was because I thought that if I tried to talk to her, she would just get mad at me and forbid me from seeing Anthony, and that would make the situation even worse. And I didn't want to do that because I'm a generally non-confrontational person. But now, I think that it was not the right thing to do and I should have spoken to her before reporting her. I feel terrible about everything, but at the same time, I know that Anthony is happy, at the very least. I've also spoken to his school authorities and managed to get them to agree to enroll him again after explaining the situation to them. He seems much happier right now, and even though he does ask about Jennifer, he doesn't seem to miss her much. So I'm literally in two minds right now about whether I did the right thing or not. Ida, for reporting my sister to CPS before speaking to her about her behavior. Update 1. Hi, thank you so much for the words of encouragement, everyone. I really needed that because I was seriously beginning to doubt myself. I didn't think that I was doing the right thing and I felt terrible about what my sister was going through. But honestly, going through the comments, I realized that this is what was necessary and I don't need to feel bad for doing what I had to do. Besides, if I had actually spoken to her before reporting her, there was a chance that she might have gotten off scot-free and even managed to brainwash Anthony against me or something. The odds were not in my favor because, of course, Anthony does not stay with me. So I don't need to regret what I did. And besides, if she has stayed sober throughout the relationship that she has had with this other guy, then she doesn't really need to worry, because if she behaves well, she's going to get custody of Anthony eventually again. The one thing that is going to remain a fact, though, is that she did end up neglecting Anthony, and that was the only reason all of this had to happen. So my parents can come up with any excuse that they want for her, it's not going to change the facts. I haven't responded to the email that they sent me, that triggered me to post here in the first place, and I don't think that I have to either. They want to defend Jennifer, they are free to do that. But I'm also free to ignore them because honestly, I'm sick of being made out to be the villain just because I did what was right. And being in a bad mental state can be an explanation. It cannot be used as an excuse for what she has been up to. My brother-in-law was a good man and I understand why she misses him, because obviously, it's probably not easy for her to deal with the fact that she's lost the love of her life. But again, she cannot compromise her son's lifestyle because of this. At least not on my watch, and I'm going to make sure that she does not get custody of Anthony back again until she can completely cut herself out of this weird new world that she has been caught up in. As her sister, I feel bad for her, but as somebody who cares about Anthony, I could not have continued to let this happen. And if my parents don't understand that, then that's on them and not on me. Anyway, keeping that aside, I have kept in touch with the caseworker and the officer in charge, and they have kept me in the loop about the entire situation. After finding out everything that I have, I think I'm even more glad that I made the decision that I did. Because apparently, even though she herself had been sober all along, she had been in the company of people who would definitely not be sober under any circumstances. The club that she frequently visited, I already knew that it was kind of a shady place from its appearance, but I had no idea most of the shady activities in this town take place there, and the group of people that she and her boyfriend used to hang out with frequently at that club were all into powdering their nose, if you know what I mean. And that's not all. There was also the intravenous stuff, and I don't want to get into the details, but you get the picture. She herself might have been clean, but that's not ideal company for anyone, let alone my sister, who's the mom of an 8-year-old. So naturally, she's going to have to extricate herself completely from that world, but so far, she has shown no interest in doing that. She has consistently been visiting her boyfriend, who has been placed in judicial custody and is awaiting trial because, unsurprisingly, he had been caught in possession just a few days after I reported Jennifer to CPS, during a raid at his house. It's shocking that she has kept in touch with him, but hasn't bothered to show up at my house to meet her own son. I can't even recognize this person anymore, and it's crazy that my parents are actually going out of their way to defend her, knowing what she's up to. On top of that, by keeping in touch with this guy, she's reducing her own chances of getting custody of Anthony back again, because it just goes to show that she values her boyfriend more than her own son. That's not a good look for anybody in the position that she is in right now, and I don't understand how she is ready to sacrifice everything just for this one guy. Needless to say, I've been pretty frustrated and confused for the past couple of weeks and it's not getting any better. But talking about it here helps because I can't exactly talk about this to anybody else at the moment. It feels too personal and I just can't bring myself to discuss it with my friends. So thanks for hearing me out, you guys. Update 2. So it's 1 week to go before our first permanent custody hearing and finally, Jennifer decided that she was going to visit Anthony. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't seem like it's going to help because almost a month ago, Anthony had been removed from her custody, and since then, she had spent most of her time visiting her boyfriend in prison but couldn't find time to spare for her own son. By now, even I had given up any expectations that I had had from her in the beginning, that she might turn out to be a good person eventually, but it's very obvious that Jennifer, whom I used to know and love, is far gone. Anyway, she showed up yesterday in the evening and since it was supposed to be a supervised visit, I was there. Just for good measure, I decided to ask our CPS caseworker to be present there as well so she could be there to watch Jennifer interact with Anthony or whatever, because if it came down to it, I did not want it to be just my testimony against her in court. Another reason that I wanted a third person there was because I believed that if it was just me and then, she would definitely find a way to start fighting with me and I did not want that to be happening in front of Anthony. I will also be aware of the fact that in front of the CPS caseworker, Jennifer would have the common sense not to pick a fight with me. So when she finally showed up, she seemed a little taken aback to see the caseworker present there as well but didn't say anything about it. Anthony was obviously thrilled to see his mother after so long and they had a lot to talk about, and it was actually kind of heartwarming to see them together. But then, I remembered that she hadn't been here to see him for almost a month because she was too busy with her boyfriend, and that made me upset once again. It sucked that she was choosing her boyfriend over her own son, but I couldn't do anything about it. Anyway, she was here for about 2 hours and throughout, she just ignored my existence as well as the caseworkers and just played with Anthony. Even when she was leaving, she didn't even look at us, and I'm glad that she didn't because I wouldn't have known what to say to her if she did. I don't even think we have anything left to say to each other anymore, but I'm glad that she did get some time with Anthony before the trial begins and everything gets even uglier. Update 3. Hey, everyone. I haven't been able to post lately because I've been very busy with work and the trial and stuff. My last update was about 2 months back and we are still attending hearings and stuff since my sister is desperate to keep Anthony with her, but most people don't think that it's a very good idea. And given how complex the case is right now, even the court is taking its own sweet time to come to a conclusion. But hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll be able to figure out a solution that works for everyone. So far, Jennifer and her lawyer have done everything in their power to prove that she's not a bad parent, and the CPS caseworker and officer, and even I have done everything in our power to prove that she might not be a bad parent in the most real sense of that word, but she's definitely not a competent parent right now. In my opinion, honestly, being a bad or good parent doesn't really matter right now because what Anthony needs is a competent parent. He does not need somebody who is absent from his life for the most part like she had been for the past few months. And he definitely doesn't need somebody who has been so financially irresponsible that she has blown all her savings, all her money on her boyfriend, and didn't even think about her son before doing any of that. She's been buying him expensive gifts, she's been paying for everything that he wants, and has even been covering his rent, groceries, and stuff. That, plus her own lifestyle, you do the math. It's not surprising that she didn't have enough money left to cover her son's tuition costs anymore, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it was a priority for her either. Apart from that, we don't exactly have any proof that she had been involved in the same kind of activities that her boyfriend and his group of friends have been accused of, if you know what I mean. But on the contrary, we don't have any proof that she hadn't been involved in those things either. So that's kind of a great area right now, and since it's been a while that she has visited that club, it's pointless to have any blood tests conducted because she's obviously going to be clean. Thankfully, though, the motel staff have confirmed that they were regulars at that place for quite a few months, and every time that they would leave several empty packs of cigarettes and at least 2 to 3 empty bottles of wine behind. And from the brands, it was obvious that these things were not your typical easy to get stuff. They were expensive and good. That's definitely not a good sign, especially when your son's tuition payments haven't been cleared. In spite of all of this, she has been doing her best to get custody and dragging everything out. But she hasn't stopped seeing her boyfriend, who is also under trial right now. It's just sad because she's screwing everything up for herself, and the most that she can do right now is delay the inevitable, but she can't avoid it. Personally, I just want this to end because it's turned into a bit of a nightmare. Since Jennifer and I had a really good relationship before all of this started, and I can't stand to see her do this to herself. I don't take any joy in watching her downfall or whatever. I just want this to be wrapped up quickly so I can try and give Anthony a normal life somehow, because that's what this has been since the beginning. So that's all that I'm hoping for right now. Update 4. Hi, so a couple of days ago, we finally had our last hearing, and in spite of all her attempts, Anthony was placed in my permanent custody, and she totally lost it as soon as that verdict was announced. She started screaming at me publicly, accusing me of stealing her son from her on purpose just because I couldn't have kids of my own and I didn't have a family or a husband. It was quite embarrassing, partly because that's not even true. I'm obviously capable of having kids, I just chose not to because marriage and kids were not my cup of tea, like I said in the beginning. It was even more embarrassing because this was happening in court and she literally had to be dragged out after the verdict because she wouldn't stop screaming at me. I don't understand why she was so upset with me, especially considering the fact that she had brought this onto herself. Besides, she will still continue to have supervised visitation rights, just like before. Now it's on her that she didn't utilize them before and she did not change her way, even after she was told repeatedly that the court was not going to look kindly upon the fact that she was still seeing her boyfriend. Her boyfriend, who has been convicted on all the charges against him just a week ago, by the way. This is his third offense, so it's obvious that she should have stopped seeing him a long time ago and should have fixed her behavior, but she didn't. So I really don't understand how I am the one to blame for any of this, but anyway, I know that she just wanted a scapegoat so she could continue to run away from her problems and pretend that she was totally innocent and I was the villain. So be it, I don't really care anymore. All I know for a fact is that Anthony is going to be well taken care of now. And I really hope that someday, in the future, she realizes her mistakes and tries to fix her behavior, because I wouldn't want her to lose her only son or for Anthony to lose his mother. I do want them to have a relationship, but for now, I think it's best that they stay apart. Anyway, he seems pretty happy with me, so I'm gonna try to keep that up. I'm probably not going to be posting here as often anymore because I'm going to try and strike the right balance between raising Anthony and the life that I've been used to so far. It's going to be different, but again, I have to do what I have to do. I love the kid, and I hope I can do right by him.